The night was unusually quiet over the valley. Zephyros, a massive dragon with dark green scales that glimmered under the moonlight, was circling near his cave. The wind was still, carrying the faint scent of smoke from distant fires. He had lived alone for many years, enjoying the calm and solitude. Dragons were proud and solitary creatures, and Zephyros was no different. He had never sought the company of others, and others had rarely sought his. But tonight, something strange stirred in the air, a soft, almost human sound. At first, Zephyros thought it was just the wind whistling through the trees. But the sound grew clearer, a tiny, weak cry that made the dragon pause mid-flight. His large eyes scanned the forest below, searching for the source. There, at the entrance of his cave, he saw a small bundle lying on the ground. The moonlight revealed a tiny human baby wrapped in thin blankets, shivering from the cold. Zephyros froze. He had heard stories about humans before, told in whispers by travelers and even by other dragons who had seen them from afar. They were fragile, small, and weak compared to dragons. Most dragons avoided them, thinking them useless or too delicate to matter. Yet here was one, alone in the wild, exposed to the dangers of the night. The baby's cries tugged at something deep inside Zephyros, something he had never felt before, a strange mix of curiosity and concern. Cautiously, Zephyros landed a few feet away, the ground shaking under his weight. The baby looked up with wide eyes, innocent and trusting, unaware of the enormous creature looming over him. Zephyros lowered his head slowly, trying not to frighten the child. The baby reached out with tiny hands, and Zephyros felt a warmth in his chest that surprised him. He had not expected such a feeling. After a moment, Zephyros realized the child needed help. The blankets were thin, and the cold night could easily harm a human so small. Carefully, he nudged the bundle with his snout, making sure not to hurt the fragile creature. The baby made a small noise, and Zephyros could almost hear it as a plea. He had no idea where the child had come from. Perhaps the parents were lost or worse, gone. He did not want to think about it. Zephyros decided he could not leave the baby there. He lifted the bundle gently in his claw, careful not to squeeze. His wings, huge and protective, wrapped around them both as he carried the child into his cave. The fire from the cave's hearth was dim, but the warmth was enough to stop the baby from shivering. Zephyros lowered the child near a soft patch of moss he had gathered for himself, and the baby instantly curled up, looking more comfortable than he had outside. For the first time in many years, Zephyros felt the need to care for someone else. He sat beside the baby, watching its chest rise and fall with each breath. The sound of the weak cries had been replaced with soft coos, and Zephyros realized that the small human had begun to trust him. He had never thought he could feel protective toward such a tiny creature, but the feeling was strong and undeniable. The night stretched on, and Zephyros remained by the baby's side. He could hear the distant howls of wild beasts, the rustle of the trees, and the whisper of the wind outside, but none of it worried him as much as the fragile life lying beside him. He decided he would not allow harm to come to this child, no matter the cost. The other dragons in the realm would surely mock him for this. A dragon's strength, they said, was in power and fear, not in kindness. But Zephyros no longer cared what others thought. He had found something more important. Someone who needed him. By morning, Zephyros had made a small nest in the corner of the cave, using soft moss and his own warmth to protect the baby. The child slept peacefully, unaware of the enormity of the world around him. Zephyros watched over him, thinking about the long road ahead. He did not know how humans would respond, or if the child's kind would ever forgive a dragon for taking care of one of their own. But he knew that he had made a choice, and that choice had changed him forever. As the sun rose, casting golden light into the cave, Zephyros looked at the baby and whispered in his deep, rumbling voice, "You are safe now. I will protect you no matter what." Though the baby could not understand the words, he smiled, tiny hands reaching toward Zephyros's scaly face. The dragon felt a swell of hope. Perhaps this small human could change not only his life but the lives of many others in the realm. Outside, the forest was waking, and the wind carried whispers from the creatures that lived nearby. Birds stopped their singing, deer froze in the trees, and even distant dragons paused, sensing the unusual presence. Something extraordinary had begun, a story that would echo far beyond the mountains and valleys. Zephyros had discovered a human baby, and with that discovery he had found a new purpose. No one had expected a dragon to care for a human. No one had imagined a bond could form between such different beings. But as Zephyros settled beside the child, watching over him with careful eyes, he knew that kindness, even in the harshest of realms, could create something powerful. Something that might change the world forever. The baby cooed again and Zephyros smiled, a rare, gentle smile for a creature so fierce. The night had brought fear and mystery, but it had also brought hope. And hope, Zephyros realized, was worth protecting above all else. Days passed in the quiet valley, and Zephyros began to understand the needs of the tiny human. The baby, who he decided to call Lyra, was fragile but full of curiosity. Each morning she would wake with bright eyes, looking around the cave as if trying to understand the vast world she had been born into. Zephyros found himself watching her for hours, fascinated by her small movements, her soft giggles, and the way she reached for him without fear. Caring for Lyra was harder than Zephyros had imagined. Dragons were strong, clever, and used to handling large prey, not something so delicate. He had to learn how to feed her, using the few supplies he had gathered from nearby forests. Fruits, soft berries, and tiny fish became her meals, and Zephyros watched carefully as she ate, making sure she did not choke or hurt herself. Sometimes he would wrap his wings around her to keep her warm, careful that his fire did not scorch her skin. The bond between them grew quickly. Lyra would laugh when Zephyros gently tapped his claw on the ground, making little tremors she found funny. She would reach for his long, scaly tail when he curled up beside her, and he learned to move slowly to avoid startling her. Zephyros had never thought a human could teach him patience, but Lyra was teaching him every day. Even the other dragons who flew high in the mountains noticed the change. They whispered to each other about Zephyros, mocking him quietly, saying that no dragon should waste time caring for a human. Yet Zephyros ignored the whispers. He felt a strange pride when he saw Lyra's small face light up at the sight of him. He realized that strength was not only in fire or claws, but in protecting someone who could not protect themselves. Every night, as the stars appeared, he would hum a low, rumbling sound that seemed to comfort her, and she would fall asleep against his chest. The sound of her breathing became a melody he could not forget, and he began to feel a deep connection he had never experienced before. One morning, Zephyros decided it was time to show Lyra the world beyond the cave. Carefully, he lifted her in his claw and stepped outside. The sunlight was bright, and the air smelled of grass and flowers. Lyra blinked at the vast landscape, her tiny fingers reaching out as if trying to touch everything at once. Zephyros lowered her gently onto a soft patch of grass, and she giggled, crawling around in wonder. Birds flew overhead, curious but unafraid, and small animals watched from the distance. Zephyros realized that Lyra was learning quickly. She watched him with wide eyes as he spread his wings, and when he flapped gently, creating a small breeze, she laughed. He began to teach her small things, how to notice danger, how to listen to the wind, and how to understand the forest's quiet signs. Lyra was fearless in her curiosity, and Zephyros found himself amazed at her courage. She reached places he thought were dangerous and explored corners of the forest he had ignored for years. But their growing closeness also brought challenges. One evening, while Zephyros and Lyra rested near the river, a group of smaller dragons approached, curious and skeptical. They hissed and growled, their eyes filled with doubt. "Why do you waste your time with a human?" one of them asked. "They are weak and fragile. You are a dragon meant for strength, not babysitting." Zephyros growled softly, a sound that made the smaller dragons hesitate. "Lyra is not weak," he said firmly. "She may be small, but she is brave. She teaches me more than you could ever imagine. Strength is not only in fire and claws, it is in protecting, in caring, in understanding. That is what makes us truly powerful." The smaller dragons exchanged uncertain glances but said nothing. Zephyros knew they would take time to accept what he had done, but he did not mind. He was not caring for Lyra to gain their approval. He was caring for her because he had chosen to, and that choice was changing him in ways he could not describe. As the days turned into weeks, Zephyros and Lyra's bond grew stronger. She began to mimic his sounds, making low hums and soft coos that seemed almost like a language between them. Zephyros learned to recognize her moods, understanding when she was curious, happy, or scared. And Lyra learned to trust him completely, crawling into his arms without fear, laughing at his rumbling voice, and reaching out to touch his scales with fascination. One morning, a loud roar echoed across the valley. Zephyros's eyes narrowed as he spotted a large shadow moving swiftly through the trees. A predator or perhaps another dragon testing him, he could not be sure. Lyra looked up at him, alarmed by the sound. Zephyros's claws dug into the ground, and he wrapped his wings around her, shielding her from view. The predator stopped at the edge of the forest, sensing the presence of the massive dragon, and then disappeared into the shadows. Lyra clung to him, feeling the warmth and protection of his body. That night, as Lyra slept peacefully against him, Zephyros realized something important. This tiny human, so small and fragile, had taught him courage, patience, and responsibility. He had learned that bonds could exist between beings of completely different worlds, and that kindness could be stronger than fear. He gazed at the stars through the cave's opening, thinking about the journey ahead. Zephyros knew that the world outside was full of challenges. There were creatures that might not understand their bond, dangers that could threaten Lyra, and dragons who might never accept a human. But he also knew something else. He would face every challenge, protect Lyra at all costs, and prove that the bond between them was more powerful than anyone could imagine. The night grew deeper, and the valley was silent except for the gentle breathing of the dragon and the baby. Zephyros rested his massive head near Lyra, feeling the small, steady heartbeat of the human against his scales. He had never thought a human could mean so much to him, but now he knew, they had changed each other forever. The valley had grown peaceful over the weeks, but Zephyros could feel that something was stirring beyond the trees. Lyra had grown stronger, her laughter filling the cave and echoing through the forest. Yet the joy she brought also attracted attention. Not all creatures in the realm welcomed the sight of a dragon caring for a human. Some saw the child as a prize, a threat, or a tool to gain power. One evening, as the sun sank behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the valley, Zephyros sensed movement. Dark shapes flitted through the trees, faster than any ordinary animal. His sharp eyes recognized the forms immediately, rival dragons, large and menacing, their scales glinting in the fading light. They were hunting and he could feel their intent. They wanted the human and they would not leave without her. Zephyros spread his wings, creating a gust that shook the forest. Lyra looked up, alarmed, and clutched his scales. Her tiny fingers dug into his skin, trusting him completely. He lowered his head to her level, his deep voice rumbling. "Stay close. Do not be afraid. I will protect you." She nodded in her small way, not fully understanding, but she sensed his determination. The first dragon leapt from the trees, large claws aimed at Zephyros. He rolled to the side, avoiding the strike, and countered with a powerful sweep of his tail that sent the attacker crashing into a nearby tree. Another dragon lunged from above, fire flickering from its mouth. Zephyros spread his wings wide, creating a shield of shadow and heat that protected Lyra. She squealed, pressing closer to him, but her eyes sparkled with awe. She had never seen a battle like this. Zephyros fought with precision. He was not reckless. He knew that one mistake could put Lyra in danger. He used the terrain to his advantage, flying low to dodge attacks and striking only when necessary. The rival dragons had never seen a dragon fight with such focus and care for something other than pride or territory. Zephyros's determination was different. It was fueled by love and protection, not aggression. Hours seemed to pass in a blur of fire and scales. Zephyros's massive wings created powerful gusts, knocking some of the attackers off balance. His claws and tail struck with calculated force, avoiding serious harm to any dragon unless it was necessary to stop the attack. Through it all, Lyra remained close, sheltered under his wings. She watched with wide eyes, her small hands occasionally reaching out to touch his scales, as if to remind him she was there. At one point, a dragon managed to break through Zephyros's defenses, lunging toward Lyra. Zephyros roared, a sound so loud it shook the valley. The attacker froze, intimidated by the strength in his voice. Zephyros swooped down, lifting Lyra with one claw and sending the intruder tumbling into a ravine. The other dragons hesitated, unsure if they could continue. Zephyros's courage and precision had turned the tide. Finally, the attackers retreated, disappearing into the shadows of the forest. Zephyros landed heavily, his body trembling from the exertion. Lyra clung to him, tears in her eyes from fear, but also relief. He gently lowered her to the ground, nuzzling her with his snout. "It is over," he said softly. "You are safe." She wrapped her tiny arms around his neck, hugging him as best as she could, and he felt an emotion deeper than pride or joy. He felt purpose. After the battle, Zephyros realized that the world outside the valley was not as safe as he had hoped. There were creatures who would challenge him, who would see Lyra as a weakness or a prize. But he also realized something important. Lyra was not helpless. The human had courage, intelligence, and a spirit that complemented his own strength. Together they were stronger than any dragon who sought to harm them. In the following days, Zephyros and Lyra practiced moving quietly, hiding in the forest when danger approached. Zephyros taught her to listen to the sounds of the trees, to recognize danger from small signs, and to trust her instincts. Lyra learned quickly, using her curiosity and cleverness to anticipate threats before they arrived. She was small, but her bravery grew with each passing day. The other dragons in the realm began to notice the unusual bond. Some mocked him still, but others watched with curiosity. They could not understand why Zephyros would risk so much for a human. Yet even among the skeptical, whispers began to spread about his courage and skill. A dragon who cared for a human, yet could defend her from all threats. That was something extraordinary. One night, Zephyros looked at Lyra sleeping peacefully, her chest rising and falling in the quiet of the cave. He thought about the battle, the danger, and the strange journey that had brought them together. "We will face more challenges," he said in a low rumble, "but we will face them together." He realized that their bond was more than protection. It was trust, respect, and understanding. It was something rare in the realm, something that could change how dragons saw humans forever. Outside, the valley was calm again, the stars reflected in the river like tiny flames. But Zephyros knew that the threats would return. The world was vast and danger lurked in every shadow. Still, he felt confident because he was no longer alone in his care. Lyra was growing, learning, and proving that even the smallest human could inspire courage in the mightiest dragon. And as he rested beside her, wings folded protectively around her, Zephyros knew one thing clearly: he would never let harm come to this child. No predator, no rival dragon, and no force in the realm could take her from him. Their bond was stronger than fear, stronger than fire, and stronger than anything that had ever challenged them. The night was quiet, but a storm was coming, a storm that would test everything they had learned. Yet together they were ready. Together they were unstoppable. The morning after the battle was calm, but Zephyros could feel that the valley itself had changed. The air seemed sharper, as if it carried the whispers of the dragons who had watched him protect Lyra. Some were curious, others skeptical, and a few even fearful. The story of a dragon defending a human child spread quietly through the trees and mountains. Zephyros paid little attention to the gossip. His focus was on Lyra. She had slept through the night, safe in the warmth of his wings, and he felt a deep satisfaction in knowing she had survived her first real danger. Zephyros decided it was time to teach Lyra more about the world. The valley was beautiful but could be unforgiving. There were cliffs, rivers, and hidden predators. He wanted her to understand the dangers, but also to see the strength and courage she could carry inside herself. He picked her up gently and placed her on a large rock overlooking the valley. The view was wide and endless, stretching to mountains in the distance and forests beyond. Lyra's eyes sparkled, and she reached toward the horizon as if trying to touch it. Zephyros lowered his massive head to her level. "You see, little one," he said in his deep, rumbling voice, "the world is big and it can be dangerous. But you have something important: courage. Even though you are small, your heart is strong. That strength can protect you when you need it most." Lyra blinked and smiled, making a soft cooing sound. Zephyros knew she could not understand every word yet, but she understood the feeling behind it. She had already begun to learn trust, patience, and bravery just by being near him. In the following days, Zephyros guided her through the forest. He taught her to listen to the rustle of leaves, the chirping of birds, and the distant sounds of approaching animals. He showed her how to hide behind rocks and trees, how to move silently, and how to sense when danger was near. Lyra was quick to learn, using her curiosity and cleverness to follow his instructions. She was small, but she had a sharp mind, and Zephyros was impressed by her focus. Other dragons began to watch from afar. Some still mocked him, calling the human weak and questioning why he spent his time teaching her. But others were silent, observing carefully. They noticed the child's bravery and the unusual bond between dragon and human. They had never seen anything like it. In a world where dragons prized power and fire, Zephyros was showing that kindness and courage could be equally strong. One afternoon, while exploring near a river, Zephyros saw a young deer trapped in a snare. It struggled, frightened and weak. Lyra immediately wanted to help. Zephyros hesitated, knowing it was risky to approach predators or traps, but he decided to let her try under his watchful eye. Together they freed the animal. Lyra laughed with delight, and the deer scampered away unharmed. Zephyros's heart swelled. He realized that compassion was a lesson just as important as courage. Protecting someone smaller, whether human or animal, made both stronger. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Zephyros and Lyra returned to the cave. The sky was painted with colors of gold and purple, and a soft wind rustled through the trees. Lyra climbed onto his back, wrapping her small arms around his neck. "You see, little one," Zephyros said, "strength is not just about fighting. It is about understanding, helping, and caring. That is what makes you truly brave." Lyra pressed her cheek against his scales, feeling his warmth. She had begun to understand that being small did not mean being weak. Her courage and kindness were her own strength, and Zephyros's guidance had helped her see it. Over the next few weeks, Zephyros continued to teach her important lessons. He showed her how to find safe paths through the forest, how to gather food without disturbing the land too much, and how to recognize signs of danger before it reached them. He taught her to trust herself and to trust him, and in turn she taught him patience and joy. Her laughter was contagious, and Zephyros found himself smiling more than he had in years. One night, a group of dragons visited the cave. They were older, wise dragons, known for their strength and knowledge of the realm. They had heard the stories of Zephyros and the human child and came to see for themselves. Some of them expected to find a weak, helpless human. Instead, they saw Lyra sitting confidently on a rock, mimicking Zephyros's low hums, and watching the stars with bright, curious eyes. The dragons were silent, and Zephyros could sense their surprise. One of the older dragons finally spoke, his voice deep and cautious. "This child, she is not afraid of us?" Zephyros shook his massive head. "She has courage and she has trust. And through her, I have learned that even the smallest being can teach a dragon something important." The older dragons nodded slowly. They could feel the truth in Zephyros's words. A human, small and fragile as she appeared, had inspired lessons of bravery, kindness and understanding in a dragon. They realized that the bond between Zephyros and Lyra was something rare, something powerful. That night, Zephyros settled down with Lyra in the cave. Her small hands rested on his scales, and she was already asleep, dreaming peacefully. He watched the firelight flicker across the walls and thought about the lessons they had learned together. Courage was not just about strength or fire, it was about facing danger with heart. Compassion was not weakness, it was the power to care for others. And trust, once earned, could bridge worlds. Zephyros knew that their journey was far from over. The realm outside the valley was full of dangers, and not all dragons would understand. But he also knew that together, they were stronger than any force they might face. Lyra had proven that even the smallest human could inspire courage and kindness in the mightiest dragon. As he wrapped his wings protectively around her, Zephyros whispered softly, "The world will test us, little one, but we will face it together. Courage, compassion, and trust, these will guide us." Lyra murmured in her sleep, and Zephyros smiled. The lessons of the valley were just the beginning. Their bond had grown beyond worlds, and through it, they would show that true strength could come from the heart. The stars shone above, quiet and watchful, as if the heavens themselves acknowledged the unusual and powerful bond between dragon and human. And Zephyros, for the first time in his long life, felt that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Years passed, and the valley had changed in ways Zephyros could never have imagined. Lyra was no longer a tiny, fragile child. She had grown into a clever, brave young human, small in size but strong in spirit. Her laughter still filled the cave, but now it carried confidence and curiosity. Zephyros watched her every day, proud of the courage she had shown and the lessons she had learned. Together they had survived dangers, learned the ways of the forest, and discovered the meaning of trust, compassion, and strength. One morning, Zephyros and Lyra set out from the cave, soaring high above the mountains. From above, the world looked vast and endless, filled with forests, rivers, and distant villages. Lyra clutched Zephyros's scales tightly, her face full of wonder. She had never flown so high before, and the wind whipped through her hair, making her laugh. Zephyros glanced at her, enjoying the joy in her eyes. He had never thought a human could feel so alive and free, and yet here she was, braver than many dragons he knew. As they flew, they encountered other dragons in the realm. Some still watched with suspicion, but many had heard stories of Zephyros and the human he had raised. They paused to look, some approaching cautiously. Zephyros landed in a clearing, and Lyra stepped forward, standing tall despite her small size. She smiled at the dragons, her courage shining through her gentle demeanor. Many of the dragons who had once doubted her, now nodded in respect. They realized that humans were not weak, that they could learn, adapt, and even inspire dragons in ways no one had imagined. Lyra had also grown wise. She had learned from Zephyros how to navigate the forests, avoid danger, and understand the creatures of the realm. She could calm frightened animals, find hidden paths, and even negotiate with dragons who might have once been hostile. Her cleverness and bravery became known throughout the valley and beyond. Wherever she went, dragons and other creatures spoke of the small human who had tamed hearts and inspired courage in even the fiercest beings. One day, a distant village of humans sent word to the valley. They had heard rumors of a dragon protecting a human child and wanted to see for themselves. Zephyros and Lyra approached carefully, knowing humans often feared dragons. But when the villagers saw Lyra standing beside Zephyros, smiling confidently, their fear melted away. They watched as Zephyros bowed his massive head respectfully, and Lyra spoke to them gently. They realized that the bond between dragon and human was one of trust and respect, not fear. The villagers invited Zephyros and Lyra to share their story. Lyra spoke of the lessons she had learned: courage, compassion, and the power of trust. Zephyros added his voice, sharing how caring for a human had taught him patience, bravery, and understanding. The humans listened in awe, realizing that kindness could bridge worlds. From that day forward, dragons and humans in the valley began to cooperate more, helping each other and learning from one another. Word of their story spread across the realm. Travelers spoke of a dragon and a human who had changed the rules of their world. Songs were sung about the small human who inspired dragons, and stories were told about the dragon who had risked everything to protect a child. Zephyros and Lyra became symbols of hope, courage, and compassion, showing that even the smallest beings could leave a lasting mark on the world. But Zephyros and Lyra were not content with fame. They continued their journeys, helping those in need, rescuing lost animals, and teaching others about courage and kindness. Lyra had grown strong and confident, yet she never lost the compassion that had guided her as a child. Zephyros too had changed. He was no longer just a dragon of strength and fire. He was a protector, a teacher, and a friend to many. Together they were unstoppable. One quiet evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in gold and purple, Zephyros and Lyra rested on a cliff overlooking the valley. Lyra leaned against Zephyros's massive side, her small hand resting on his scales. "Do you think they will always remember us?" she asked softly. Zephyros rumbled a deep, gentle sound. "It does not matter if they remember us, little one. What matters is the courage and kindness we leave behind. That is our true legacy." Lyra nodded, understanding more than her words could express. They had faced danger together, learned from each other, and shown the world that trust and compassion could change hearts. The realm was safer, kinder, and stronger because of their bond. And that bond would continue to echo across generations, inspiring dragons, humans, and creatures of every kind. As night fell, the stars appeared, bright and silent above the valley. Zephyros lifted Lyra onto his back, and together they soared into the sky. The wind rushed past them, carrying their laughter and the quiet strength they had built together. They flew higher than ever before, leaving the valley below, but the mark they had made remained everywhere. Zephyros looked down at Lyra, her hair glowing in the moonlight, and felt a deep peace. They had changed each other's lives, and through their courage, compassion, and trust, they had changed the world. The legacy of a dragon and a human, bound by kindness and bravery, would echo across the realm forever. And as they disappeared into the horizon, the creatures of the valley and beyond whispered stories of the dragon who found a human baby and the child who taught a dragon the true meaning of strength. It was a story of hope, a story of courage, and a story that would never be forgotten.